The opinion of 10,000 men is worth nothing if those men lack wisdom and understanding. He knew that most people waste their lives imprisoned by the thoughts and judgments of others, never realizing they're chasing shadows that have no real power over them, chasing validation that dissolves the moment it's received only to need more the next day. It's an endless cycle, a hunger that can never be satisfied because it's not real hunger. It's a phantom created by fear. In my view, Marcus identified the invisible chain that keeps most people trapped, the chain we willingly place around our own necks, seeking validation from those who may never truly understand them, who may be just as lost, just as confused, just as imprisoned by their own need for approval, and yet we give them authority over our lives, over our choices, over our very sense of self-worth. So I'm going to explore this idea through a dialogue. Deep in the mountains of Kyoto, there's a tea house that opens only at dawn. The path to reach it is unmarked, winding through cedar trees that have stood for centuries. Few travelers find it, but those who do are searching for something they cannot name, something missing in their lives, a peace they've glimpsed but never held. This morning, Kenji arrives as the sun breaks through the mist, his footsteps heavy with exhaustion, not from the climb, but from years of carrying other people's expectations. He's spent his whole life trying to be what everyone else wanted, and somewhere along the way he lost track of who he actually was. Inside the tea house sits an old master, his face weathered like the mountains themselves. And over tea, he has the following conversation with Kenji. Master, seeking approval from others is like drinking salt water. The more you drink, the thirstier you become. You think it will satisfy you, but it only creates more craving, more desperation, more emptiness. Kenji shifts uncomfortably. I'm not sure I follow. Seeking approval seems natural. Everyone wants to be liked. Everyone wants to belong. What's wrong with that? The master pours more tea, his movements deliberate and calm. Nothing is wrong with wanting connection, but you confuse being liked with being controlled. When you need someone's approval to feel worthy, when you check their face to see if you're doing it right, when you edit your words, censor your thoughts, reshape yourself into what you think they want, you've given them the keys to your prison. And the worst part is, they didn't even ask for that power. You gave it away freely. Kenji frowns. But how is wanting approval a prison? The master gestures to the garden outside. Think about the bamboo. When the wind blows, it bends. It moves with the force, flexible and strong. But it never asks the wind for permission to exist. It simply is what it is. The bamboo doesn't grow differently because other bamboo judges it. It doesn't shrink itself because the pine tree towers above it. It doesn't try to become something else to earn the approval of the garden. It simply grows according to its nature, and in doing so, it becomes exactly what it's meant to be. Kenji looks out at the garden, then back at the master. But we're not bamboo. We're people, and people need other people. We're social creatures. We evolved to care what the tribe thinks. Otherwise, we'd have been cast out, left to die alone. The master nods slowly. Kenji, you're right that we need connection, that we're built for community. But needing someone's approval and connecting authentically are opposites, not complements. When you seek approval, you wear a mask. You show them what they want to see, not what you are. You become a performer, always checking if they're applauding, always afraid the performance will slip and they'll see the real you underneath. And the tragedy is that even when they approve, Even when they smile and nod and tell you you're doing well, they're not approving of you. They're approving of your performance. They're approving of the character you're playing, the mask you've carefully crafted. And so you remain unknown, unseen, alone, even in a crowd of admirers. Kenji's hands tighten around his teacup. I never thought of it that way. I always believed that if people approved of me, that meant I was valuable, that I was worth something. But still, what if I lose people by being myself? What if they reject me? What if I end up alone? The master sets down his cup, the porcelain making a soft sound against the table. You cannot lose what was never real. If someone only accepts your mask, they've never actually accepted you. They've accepted a fiction, a character you performed. And maintaining that fiction requires you to die a little every day, to suppress what's real, to deny what's true, to live in constant fear of being discovered. Tell me, Kenji, and the master's eyes are kind but piercing. Would you rather be celebrated for being someone else, applauded for a performance that exhausts you, or criticized for being yourself, judged for your truth but free in your own skin? Kenji looks down at his tea, the steam rising like his own thoughts. I guess when you put it that way, the choice seems obvious, but it feels impossible. Everyone in my life has expectations. My family expects me to follow the traditional path. My boss expects me to be agreeable and ambitious. My friends expect me to be fun and available. How do I break free from all of that without losing everything? The master gestures again to the garden. Look at the bamboo again. Really look at it. It faces obstacles too, shallow soil that barely feeds it, harsh winters that strip its leaves, the weight of snow that bends it nearly to breaking, storms that threaten to uproot it. But it doesn't ask how to grow despite these things. It doesn't strategize or plan. It simply grows through them. The obstacles don't disappear. The bamboo becomes strong enough, develops deep enough roots that the obstacles no longer define it. The winter comes and goes. The bamboo remains. Kenji leans forward. So you're saying I just need to be stronger? To toughen up and not care? The master shakes his head gently. No, I'm saying you need to stop believing that their opinions have power. Right now, you think that if your boss disapproves, something terrible will happen. You'll lose your job, your security, your future. But what actually happens? Maybe nothing. Maybe something. Maybe you lose the job, maybe you don't. But you've already suffered 1,000 times in your mind, fearing what might never come, creating scenarios of disaster that exist only in your imagination. The real suffering isn't their disapproval. The real suffering is this. It's your attachment to their approval. It's the constant monitoring, the endless performance, the death of who you really are. The master refills both cups, the tea steaming in the cool mountain air. Let me ask you something. If you were alone on an island with everything you needed to survive, food, water, shelter, but no other people, no one to judge you, no one to approve or disapprove, would you still worry what people think of you? Kenji answers immediately. No, of course not. There'd be no one there. The master nods. Exactly. So the worry isn't real. It's not based on any actual threat. It's a story you tell yourself, a story that says your worth depends on their judgment, that you only have value if they validate you. But Kenji, your worth existed before you met them. It existed when you were a child, before you learned to perform. It existed in your first breath, and it will exist after they're gone, after their opinions have faded, after the roles and expectations have crumbled. Your essential worth, your true nature that cannot be given or taken by another person. I see what you mean, Kenji says slowly, like he's waking from a long sleep. But how do I actually live this way? How do I stop caring when I've spent my whole life caring? When every instinct tells me to check, to monitor, to adjust, to make sure they approve. The master smiles, a smile that holds both compassion and wisdom. You're asking the wrong question. You're asking how to be free, as if freedom is something you achieve, something you do. But freedom isn't something you do. It's something you stop doing. Stop checking if they approve. Stop scanning their faces for signs of judgment. Stop editing yourself for their comfort. Stop shrinking so they feel bigger. Stop apologizing for taking up space. Stop performing for an audience that may not even be watching. The freedom is already here. It's your natural state. You've just been too busy performing, too consumed with the act to notice it. Kenji sits in silence, watching the bamboo sway, feeling something shift inside him. Something he can't quite name, but it feels like release, like a weight he didn't know he was carrying, slowly setting down. Marcus Aurelius said that the opinions of the unwise are meaningless, worth nothing, and I explored this teaching through a dialogue between a seeker and a master. But the truth goes even deeper. The deepest truth here is this. We spend our lives seeking permission from people who never had authority over us. We wait for validation from those who are just as lost as we are. We believe that acceptance from others will finally make us whole, will fill the emptiness inside, will prove that we're worthy of love, of respect, of existence itself. But acceptance from others while you reject yourself is just another form of suffering. It's a house built on sand that collapses the moment the tide comes in. Being yourself isn't about rebellion or rejecting everyone's input or becoming isolated and disconnected. It's not about arrogance or refusing to grow or dismissing all feedback. It's about understanding that your essence, your true nature, your fundamental worth cannot be diminished by someone else's perception. Their opinion is just that, an opinion. A thought passing through their mind, colored by their own wounds, shaped by their own fears, limited by their own understanding. When we live for approval, we give others the power to define us. We hand them the pen and ask them to write our story. We become their idea of us, their projection, their expectation, rather than what we actually are. And the cruel irony is, the approval we receive in this state brings no peace, no lasting satisfaction, because deep down we know, in the quiet moments, in the space between performances, we know they're not approving of us. They're approving of our performance, of our mask, of the carefully constructed image we've presented for their consumption. On the other hand, when we release our need for validation, when we stop performing, when we stand in our truth regardless of the response, regardless of whether they applaud or walk away, we discover something profound, something that changes everything. That security doesn't come from being accepted, it comes from accepting ourselves. Real security comes from knowing who you are and being willing to be that, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it costs you, even when others don't understand. And paradoxically, when we stop seeking approval, when we release our desperate need for validation and acceptance, we often receive more genuine connection, more real relationships, more authentic love. Because people sense authenticity, they feel the difference between someone who's performing for approval, adjusting their personality like a chameleon, and someone who's simply being, someone who's at home in their own skin, someone who doesn't need you to validate them to make them feel real. Marcus understood that most people's opinions are just reflections of their own fears and conditioning, echoes of what they were taught, projections of their own insecurities. Why give them the power to direct your life? Why let their confusion become your compass? Why trade your freedom for the temporary comfort of their approval? The bamboo doesn't ask permission. The river doesn't apologize for flowing. The mountain doesn't shrink to make the valley feel better. Nature simply is, and in being what it is, it creates beauty. It serves its purpose. It fulfills its role in the greater whole. You are part of that same nature. You have the same permission to exist, to take up space, to be exactly what you are. The master stands and walks to the window. Kenji joins him, both watching the bamboo grove bending and swaying in perfect harmony with forces beyond their control, yet never losing their essential nature. You know, Kenji, the master says quietly, there's something else worth understanding about this whole dance of approval and disapproval. When you live for someone else's validation, you're not just imprisoned by their expectations. You're also robbed of something precious, the ability to truly celebrate your own victories, to genuinely feel proud of your accomplishments, to know deep in your bones that you did something meaningful. Because when you achieve something while seeking approval, the achievement feels hollow. You immediately look to them. Did they notice? Did they approve? Was it enough? And if they don't react the way you hoped, the achievement crumbles in your hands, becomes worthless, because its value was always dependent on their reaction, not on the thing itself. Kenji nods slowly. I felt that. I got a promotion last year, something I worked toward for months, but my father barely acknowledged it, said it was expected, and suddenly the whole thing felt meaningless, like I'd climbed a mountain only to find there was nothing at the top. Exactly, the master says. You gave him the power to determine whether your achievement mattered. But the truth is, the climb itself, the growth it required, the person you became through the process, that had value regardless of his response. This is another layer of the prison, not just that we perform for approval, but that we let others determine the meaning and value of our own experiences, our own growth, our own life. Kenji is quiet for a moment, then asks, but Master, how do you distinguish between healthy consideration of others and this prison of approval seeking? Where's the line? The Master turns to face him. That's a wise question. The line is this: healthy consideration asks, how will my actions affect others? Approval seeking asks, how will others perceive me? One is about impact, the other is about image. One is grounded in genuine care, the other in fear. When you consider how your words might hurt someone, that's empathy. When you twist your words to make sure they think you're smart, that's performance. When you work hard because the work matters and serves something beyond yourself, that's purpose. When you work hard so people will see you as successful, that's performance. The difference is in your relationship with yourself. Are you betraying yourself or expressing yourself? Kenji walks back to the table, sits down heavily. So much of my life has been performance. I'm not even sure I know who I am anymore beneath all the masks. The master returns to his seat, pours fresh tea. That's the real work then, not figuring out how to stop caring what people think, but discovering who you are when you're not performing. Most people never do this work. They live their entire lives as a collection of roles, a son, an employee, a friend, but never discover the self that exists before all the roles. And here's what's beautiful. When you know yourself, really know yourself, other people's opinions become less threatening because you have something solid to stand on, an internal reference point that doesn't shift with every changing wind. You can hear feedback without being destroyed by criticism. You can receive praise without becoming addicted to it. You can be misunderstood without losing yourself because you know who you are, regardless of what they think. Kenji looks up, his eyes bright with something like hope. How does someone do that? Discover who they are? The master smiles. You've already begun by asking the question, by sitting here, by being willing to look at the performance instead of just continuing it. The work is simple but not easy. It requires spending time with yourself, not as you wish you were, not as others expect you to be, but as you actually are. It requires honesty, brutal sometimes, about what you really think, really feel, really want. It requires solitude, not loneliness, but chosen aloneness, where you're not performing for anyone, not even yourself. Sit in the morning with your tea and notice what thoughts arise when you're not distracting yourself. Walk in nature and pay attention to what draws you, what repels you, what makes you come alive. Write without censoring. Let the truth spill onto the page, even the ugly parts, especially the ugly parts. And over time, through this practice, you'll begin to recognize yourself the way you'd recognize an old friend after years apart. There's a self beneath the performance that's been waiting patiently for you to come home. The tea house fills with the sound of bamboo rustling in the wind. Both men sit in comfortable silence, the kind that only exists between people who've touched something real. Eventually, Kenji speaks, his voice soft but clear. I think I've been afraid that if people saw the real me, they wouldn't like what they found. The master nods. That's the fear that keeps the prison locked from the inside. But consider this. The people who only like your performance were never really your people anyway. They like a fiction, a mask, a character. The ones who will truly matter, the connections that will feed your soul, those only become possible when you stop performing. Yes, you might lose some people when you stop being who they want you to be, but those relationships were already false. You're just acknowledging what was always true. And in the space they leave, real relationships become possible. Connections based on truth, not performance. Kenji takes a long breath, lets it out slowly. I think I understand now why you said freedom isn't something you do, but something you stop doing. Because all of this, the performance, the monitoring, the fear, it's exhausting, and freedom would just be stopping. The master's eyes crinkle with warmth. Yes, freedom is the absence of the performance, not the presence of something else. You don't have to become someone new. You just have to stop pretending to be someone you're not. The sun has risen fully now, golden light streaming through the windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The tea has grown cold, but neither man moves to refresh it. Kenji feels different, lighter somehow, like he's been carrying heavy bags for so long he forgot they weren't part of him. And now, just by seeing them, they've become easier to set down. Not gone. He knows the habits of a lifetime won't disappear with one conversation, but looser, more like a choice than a prison. Marcus Aurelius wrote those words about the worthlessness of unwise opinions 2,000 years ago. And yet here we are, still learning the same lesson, still discovering that the chains we wear are ones we forged ourselves. The dialogue between Kenji and the master is happening in countless forms across the world, in therapy rooms and coffee shops, in journals and midnight conversations, wherever people dare to ask, who am I beneath the performance? And the answer is always the same. You are enough. You always were. You didn't need their approval to have worth. You just needed to remember that your worth was never theirs to give. When we release our grip on approval seeking, when we stop performing, stop monitoring, stop shrinking and editing and hiding, we don't become selfish or disconnected or uncaring about others. Instead, we become more genuinely connected because we're bringing our real selves to the relationship, not a carefully curated version designed to please. We become more generous because we're not depleted by the constant performance. We have something real to offer. We become more creative because we're no longer censoring ourselves, no longer killing ideas before they're born, worried about what people will think. We become more alive because we're no longer dying a little bit every day to maintain a fiction. This is what Marcus knew, what the Master knows, what anyone who's walked this path knows, that seeking approval is drinking salt water, and true freedom comes not from getting everyone to approve, but from releasing the need for their approval. It's a paradox that seems impossible until you experience it, that you can care about people deeply, genuinely, fully, without needing their approval to feel worthy. You can value their input without giving them power over your worth. You can be influenced by their wisdom without being controlled by their judgment. The bamboo bends with the wind, but it doesn't become the wind. It remains bamboo, flexible yet rooted, responsive yet true, and so can you. But at the end of the day, this is just my exploration of an ancient truth, filtered through my understanding, shaped by my experience, limited by my perspective. I'm not claiming to have mastered this, to live perfectly free from approval seeking. We're all works in progress, all students of this practice, all learning to remember what we somehow forgot, that we were born worthy, that our value is inherent, that other people's opinions, while potentially informative, are never definitive. Take what resonates here. Let the rest fall away. Question everything. Trust your own experience. Find your own path. And if you see this differently, if your journey has taught you something else, if you've found other truths that work for you, I genuinely want to hear it in the comments below. Because maybe the real point isn't to all arrive at the same conclusion, but to each find our own authentic way of being in the world. Maybe the wisdom isn't in conforming, even to wisdom, but in discovering what's true for you and having the courage to live that truth, regardless of whether anyone else approves.